So how do you go about, expressing that you need to be heard?
Yeah.
How do you do it without coming on too strong?
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for tuning back into our second act with Paige and Silka.
For your second active life. How you doing, Silka?
I'm doing good. Paige, on this segment, we want to continue something we started on the last segment, and that is our focus on confidence, or perhaps the lack thereof. That, people as we age, we start losing confidence, and what do we do about that? And one thing that you mentioned that I can totally identify with is that you feel as though we're not being heard anymore. Talk to me about that.
So this is Paige's perspective. I feel like in our world, everyone is battling to be heard, whether it's in our relationships, with our career, with our kids, with our medical doctors, and on social media. Where do I fit in? Why is someone not hearing the information or the wisdom that I have to say? How come I can't get out and do what I really want to do? Why is my significant other not hearing me? And it's a really big thing because it's so deep not being heard that did it just begin with our generation? No. All through our life, we go through times that we're not being heard. And so how much have we brought from that to our, where we are now, 50 and over, and then piled on top of whatever we brought, in our bag from then with our population and generation not being heard. Now it's on top of all of that. And I think it's really, really a problem. I know I see it consistently with my clients, my patients of, I'm not being heard with my significant other. Social media, I go on social media and everyone seems to be doing really well and things are great. And I'm like, do not believe that because it's another place for a mask. But no one's really being real and honest about, you know, them not being heard and
Well,
wanting to be heard.
what's so interesting really is that in the age of social media, when anybody can get on like we are, we created our own
Hmm.
show, that when you're not heard is actually amplified. You
Yes.
amplified, how you're not being received or heard through the social media platforms. And that, can certainly strip at your self-confidence, and as it does with a lot of people.
Yeah, it does. So some of the things that I want to bring up that I want people to kind of think about is because I believe many people don't feel heard. I think this is huge. I think this is universal. So the first thing that I want you to ask yourself is what would it look like when you've been heard? Because if you ask people, well, what's that look like? They kind of step back and go, I don't know. So, what does it look like to be heard in personal relationships, in career, with your kids, with medical doctors, social media, whatever it is? What would that look like? Number two, what is the real deep need to be heard? Because there's a lot that goes with that. How much of it can be seated in family of origin, something happened to you growing up, something in your early 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it might be. Like, where is it stemming from? Because you have to figure out where's the root? Where's the root? And then what would it be like for you to be heard? And once you're heard, do you have to keep craving to be heard, craving to be heard, craving to be heard? So
That
there's like a spectrum of that.
that is such a good point because it's like it seems so obvious. I said that a lot lately because some things are seem obvious but they're not. What does that mean to be heard? What do you lack? What are you lacking
Mhm.
when you're not heard? We
And yeah, and sometimes when we're not being heard in our personal relationships, it bleeds out in every other thing that we're doing. And sometimes you are being heard in other places, but not in your personal relationship. But because it's so needed here, it gets amplified everywhere else. And the neediness and the anger of not being heard gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So you want to ask yourself, if I'm heard in this area of my life, what I needed as much in these other areas of my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. A lot came to me that I don't necessarily, need to share.
We all go through it, including myself.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's for me just now, just in thinking about it, more as a lack, not as a need, but as a lack. Then all of a sudden you cue in on what it is that you're lacking, and which again does amplify at this stage in life.
Right. So much more after you're 50, because again, we are a population that they think, oh, well, you're done, you're out to pasture. Now that's changed a lot. And I think our show is helping to change that a lot too. So really kind of think about, what does being heard mean to you? What does it look like to you? What does it feel like to you? What areas of your life do you really need to be heard? And if there's one particular area, if you're heard over here, will it calm down the other areas? And then you put on top of that being a female. Because how long have females not been heard or been pushed down, or there's been a submissiveness, whatever it might be? So you add that on top of everything else. And again, I'd like to use this comment a lot, but it become a perfect storm of how it bleeds out in all areas of your life. And I'm sure we all know someone who needs to be heard, and they come on so strong that it's bigger than the need to be heard. So there's so much emotion packed behind that is it really about being heard, or is there something in the background that's so loud that you haven't dealt with yet?
So how do you go about expressing that you need to be heard, or I'm asking,
Yeah.
how do you do it without coming on too strong?
So I think there's a time to come on strong. So I'm not saying don't. I think there's a time to come on really strong. And coming on strong, again, lives on a spectrum. Where is that? And how that connects to the situation that you're coming on strong with. So first you want to find which area you want to kind of take on first. If you feel more comfortable doing it in your career, start there. Then ask yourself, what does it look like to be heard? What do you need to say to the other person? And it might start out with, let me just lay the groundwork here. I need to speak with you about something, but I cannot have you interrupt me. Please let me finish, and then I will be glad to have feedback. And at the same time, if once I say what I need, please don't move on to something else with your need without addressing what I need. And then I can move on to hear what you have to say. Because so many times when someone tells us that they need to be heard, we might think we're listening and then push it aside and then go on to something else. And that's really not being heard. You got to say what you need to say, but was it really heard? Another thing is, you may take that route, put the foundation down, put the boundaries down, say what you need to say, and the person doesn't listen to you anyway. Mm-hmm. So then you have to step back and go, okay, this is a space in an area that I'm really not going to be heard in, but I at least spoke up. I put a boundary down, and I will continue to do that. So now where's another area in my life that I need to speak up in? And what do I need to say, and how do I need to say it?
Yeah. Well, and I suppose it's typically in some sort of, obviously, relationship, because in order to be heard, some sort of human has to be involved. It's not your dog.
Yeah.
So, but you have, either your, of course, in, husband or spouse or boyfriend, that's obvious. Career, I think, makes it a little bit more difficult depending on who the person is, like your boss, or what you can and cannot do. But I think the point that I'm hearing you make is that to gain that confidence, what we're talking about ultimately in this segment, is to at least make that attempt to be heard, and that in and of itself helps boost your self-confidence. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it does. And also, if you're finding that you're in whatever the relationship is, whether it is intimate relationship, career, with your kids, with a medical practitioner, you have to decide, is this toxic? Do I need to step back and not be involved in this? And, for whatever reason, the medical practitioners are really coming up for me, because after 50, we deal more and more with medical practitioners. And because of how our healthcare is, there's this much time for these many things to talk to. So many times, and I hear this consistently, patients don't feel like they're being heard. And so I say it's really important, wherever you go into for a medical practitioner, to go in and be strong and say, I'm coming to see you and paying you. This is what I need. I need you to hear what is going on with me and what I know that is going on with me. And I need you to hear that and not dismiss that, because we are part of a team. So I'm just giving a little side note, because so many people go through that.
Yeah.
Especially after 50.
Yeah, no, great question. I just did a segment with Rochelle Brown, the fitness writer, on that, about recovering after an orthopedic surgery or injury.
I saw that.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, because they, especially with something like that, it's not, you're not taking a, well, why do you have to go out and run marathons? Well, your time is done doing this, or no. If that's what you're going to do, you better get hurt. Paige, we're running out of time here. This is really an important topic that we all deal with. How would you like to close this out?
Just, everybody has a right to be heard. Just remember that just because you have the right to be heard doesn't mean you're always going to be heard. So sometimes it's just about speaking up, putting your boundaries down, and whatever someone does with it, then you have to make a decision, okay? And there's so many times that you are heard when you decide to speak up and put a boundary down and tell someone what you need. And each time you step in and do that, all the other areas of your life get a little bit easier, because you're like, okay, I did that. I was heard that time. And that builds the confidence. So the next stage or next place in your life that you want to step into and have this conversation, you feel a little bit stronger. So what I always tell people is, start with a good practice field. Start with someone who you feel like, I can do this with. Then gain the confidence from there, and then move on from that place.
Yeah, no, great advice. Paige, thanks so much. We'll see you on the next segment of Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life.
Bye. If there's a topic you'd like to see us cover on Second Act TV, please go to our website. There's a suggestion box in the upper right-hand corner of our website on the home page. Just drop us a line. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Button's right over here. See you next time.